Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinephile. This week, we are talking about John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum. That is our third of three Wick Weeks. That was from 2019. Jake, this is the first time you've seen John Wick, Chapter 3. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah. Um, I like it the most out of all the John Wick movies I've seen. Um, I felt like this had a little more direction to it, maybe. It felt like there was a little more substance to the story. It wasn't just fight sequence to fight sequence. I felt like there were less fight sequences in this. I don't know if that's actually true, but it felt like I don't know if it's just that there was more story to it, that it felt more balanced than the first two movies. But no, I enjoyed it. I think um, we see the most growth of our characters in this movie, and so no, I liked it. I can finally check off my film watch list all the John Wick movies, so I don't seem like an uncultured swine when people talk about John Wick and I'm left in the dark.
I mean, I don't think you're an uncultured swine. But I'm glad you've seen these movies now. Yeah, I think kind of going off of what you said, I wrote down that this movie really deals with consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And it like deals with the consequences of the first two movies.
Yeah.
So I think there's more payoff just from a story level,
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of the fallout of what has come before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for sure that is probably why there is more story. It's definitely I wouldn't say it's more globetrotting because in both John Wick Chapter 2 and John Wick Chapter 3, they go to one place. Now, I will
Yeah,
say, I thought of you when they went to Casablanca.
of course. So we're just gonna dive in with fun facts and trivia right now because that's really
Yes.
my only fun fact of trivia. I mean, we could
Okay.
talk again about how John Wick did most, or Keanu Reeves did most of the stunts except for the car ones. But we've talked about that previously. No, by far
Right.
the
Right.
most interesting bit of trivia was the fact that they went to Casablanca, and that was an intentional choice because Chad Stahelski, when they made the first John Wick, the concept of the Continental is loosely based off of Rick's Cafe from the movie Casablanca 1942.
Interesting.
It's loosely based off that from the fact of Rick's Cafe is a meeting place for outcasts, for misfits in society, right? Um
Hmm.
People who don't, people with checkered and troubled past where they can go and not be asked a lot of questions. And so that's kind of how what inspired the idea of the Continental when they made the first movie. So when they were trying to decide on the location for this one, they're like, well, let's go to Casablanca because that's what started this whole kind of convoluted idea. And so I, of course, Casablanca is one of my favorite movies of all time. Uh, Watch that at least like 10 times a year. I
It's a good
cry.
movie.
It is an incredible movie. I will, we will do this for the podcast sometime.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just incredible. But no, I definitely, that was my favorite piece of trivia, uh, researching this
That's
movie.
that's really interesting. I guess I never thought of it that way,
Mhm.
but I mean, the
It's
Continental really
interesting.
is
Yeah.
for outcasts. Yeah.
It's interesting because when I first read that, these were two places, the Continental and Rick's Cafe, that I had never linked. I read that and I was like,
Right.
that's in one place is you know run by an American expat for all kinds of refugees in Casablanca in World War II, and the other is a hotel for hitmen. So I'm like,
Right.
where does this flow together? But when you look at it as a home for outcasts, a place where they can belong, really. um it's just it's an interesting concept, I think, and it's
I
cool.
agree.
I like it.
I agree. This movie honestly has a lot of interesting kills too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, we're not going to go straight into our favorite kill, but
It's
I
like,
did want to kind of.
are we at the end of the episode already? That
I
was
mean,
all,
our Oscar
folks.
special is so long that
An
it's
hour and 20 minutes. My
hey, but
God.
it's a good time
If y'all watched all of that, God bless you.
for real, for real. But I kind of wanted to. Well, actually, no. What we'll do next is we'll talk about my fun facts or the
Yes.
budget of this movie. So the budget, we're going to do another comparison. Last Wick Week, we did a comparison of John Wick Chapter 1 and John Wick Chapter 2. So the production budget for this movie was $75 million. Not not super expensive by today's means. I mean, a lot of films are over 100 million, but the production budget for Chapter 2 was only 40 million. So it almost doubled its production budget. I think you can feel that
Mm-hmm.
in the scope of this movie. I the One of the things that I love, and we'll talk about it later, is the production design and the set design of this movie is insane. It's so good.
I felt like
It's
you're right. It is very nice, and I enjoy it a lot. A lot of thought and detail went into that, but I think this perhaps is more. I felt like this was more. It tapped into more of the creative, inventive side of the production design that we saw in the first movie that I felt maybe was lacking a little bit in the second movie. And I think it lacks it in the second movie because they went to a place like Rome, right? They
mm,
Rome is such an iconic place that I feel like for people, for pop culture or mass culture, we have an idea of Rome even if we've never been to Rome, right?
sure.
We have we you hear the word Rome, and all these images come to your mind from what you've seen in pictures, travel magazines, you know online, in movies even. um and I felt like John Wick 2 played very much into that, which
Mm.
was fitting, but I also felt like that was a constraint that the first and then now the third movie, I don't think they had that when it came to production design. I felt like
Now,
they could flesh it out a little more. Things that immediately come to mind are the nightclub sequence in the first one and the finale in the glass
yeah.
section of the continent. Like those felt like very those reminded me of each other, right? And I didn't see something in John Wick 2 that reminded me of either of those things.
Would you say that has to do with almost verisimilitude in a way that for because we have this idea of Rome, we know what to expect of the buildings, we know what to kind of expect of the architecture and maybe even the styling of the inside of the buildings,
Yeah.
but we can suspend our disbelief a little bit more when it comes to either that nightclub or the Continental or even Casablanca in a way,
Yeah.
um, to so they can have more interesting kind of layouts. Would you say?
Yeah. I really feel like you're to your point, yes, I think you're correct that they were going for a level of verisimilitude with all the Rome sets in two, but I almost felt like that was um, this is something I never thought I would say, but I almost felt like it was too believable because there's a certain like not fantasy quality to these John Wick movies, but
I mean, it is fantasy,
they're slightly larger than life, right?
slightly. Yeah.
This never this stuff never happens in real life. Okay.
Right.
um and so I felt like that nightclub and that glass, the section of the Continental in the first and the third, like took my brain there of like, this isn't real, but so much of this place, of this movie, we've you know not asked you to believe is real, we just asked you to enjoy it. Whereas I think that was perhaps an opportunity missed in the second one, where perhaps with the production design, they're like, oh, okay, we have to execute what Rome is, which I can. The more I think about it, like I can see where like they tried to do it, because like the like not ball, but like the gala with the big
Yeah, the
performance.
event thing that
Yeah,
they're yeah.
that's like in a castle. Like they definitely like tried to give like similar vibes to that, but I don't think it was enough, or it was different enough that it didn't connect for me in the same way I've seen the design in the first and the third connect for me.
Well, I will tell you, going back to budget and box office, it looks like it connected with a lot of people. Because chapter two, like we had said before, had about a $30.4 million opening weekend. Chapter three had a $56.8 million opening weekend, for a total of 171 million domestic, as opposed to chapter two, 79.5 million domestic. If we remember from last Wick Week, that chapter two had a grand total of $171.5 million worldwide. And the fact that the domestic of chapter three
Yeah,
hits that is wild.
yeah.
And it ended with a domestic or a worldwide total of $327.7 million. So
Wow.
again, this franchise keeps leveling up. It like doubles every
Oh yeah,
time, which is
it's making money.
insane.
It's making a good amount of money. So
And since they don't spend, I mean, with a $75 million budget, um, yeah, no, they're good. They're making money. So
so I want to get to something here. Sorry to cut you off. So when it comes to filmmaking nowadays, there's I feel like there's no mid budget, right? There's either really low budget stuff or really high budget stuff. And I think, if you look back in time, like throughout filmmaking, like you look at the progression of successful filmmakers, and oftentimes, you move from low to mid to high budget ranges, right? You're talking directors, producers, even actors and actresses,
right.
you learn how to, it seems to be kind of the unwritten rule of, you learn how to make a movie with almost no money. Yes, you're still talking millions of dollars, but in terms of a movie set, like no money, you learn how to make a movie that way. And if you're successful at that, traditionally it's kind of like, okay, well, we promote you kind of up to this mid tier. And then if you're successful at that and you learn how to make, you can successfully make a movie with that amount of money, then we bump you up to, then you get your big blockbusters and everything. With, shall we say, contemporary filmmaking, looking the last 10 years or so, that middle tier has kind of gone away, and you're seeing people make the jump from low to high like that.
Which has been problematic for some.
A lot of people have felt like it's problematic. A lot of you've seen a lot of directors and producers that don't know what to do with all this money now. They made a really cool film that had a lot of potential for very little money, but now the studio gives them 80 million, 100 million, and they're like, well, let's just spend it all on explosions. Kind of looking at you, James Bay.
You mean Michael Bay?
Michael Bay, James Bay. Isn't
No,
he a
you're thinking
singer?
James Cameron.
No, I mean Michael
No,
Bay.
I
I'm
know, but you
throwing.
said James Bay.
Yeah.
And
Isn't
and
isn't that a musician? The
I
singer,
know
maybe.
Sadiq Bay plays in the NBA.
Anyways, Michael Bay, king of unnecessary explosions.
He
Um,
really is.
yeah, he really is.
At Transformers.
It bugs me a lot. But anyways, what I'm trying to make here is, I think you're seeing John Wick, you're seeing it kind of level up, if you will, with every installment of this. You're adding more to the budget and it's making more, but you're not, we didn't go from 15 million to 80 million.
Right.
They had that mid tier, and so, whereas John Wick was kind of a very, like, shall we say, simple film, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
As they've been getting more money, you've seen, the production quality go up, but also there's more there's more layers to it. Okay, you're there's more depth to it. We're adding more things, and so I think that this is something that's worked in especially Chad Stahelski's favor, is being able to like go through kind of that natural progression of learning how to make movies at all these different levels. Because I think if they would have just looked at John Wick 1 and been like, holy crap, like, yeah, we didn't spend a lot, but we made a good amount for not spending a lot. So let's throw a lot of money at this. I don't know if we would be talking about this in preparation for John Wick Chapter 4.
Yeah, that's absolutely, because as we said from week one, I mean, they didn't plan on this being a franchise necessarily. No. This was just a cool actioner.
They just wanted a badass movie.
Yeah, and they delivered. And you're right. I think one of the things I was thinking about when I was watching this movie is with the larger sets, more guns, more extras, things like that, we're able to see a little bit more of why John Wick is the Baba Yaga. Mm-hmm. He's able to kill people in a multitude of different ways. There's a lot of guns, a lot of fighting, you know,
guns, lots of guns,
lots of guns. I think that is to the John Wick franchise's benefit. Mm-hmm. But you're right. This is a unique franchise in that it has leveled up every time, but not, you know, studios throwing $200 million at this.
I don't think it's not outgrown itself.
Yeah, I don't think you could make this movie with I mean, you could make it with $200 million, obviously, but I don't think that would service the movie.
Right.
I think probably $100 million is probably the top for a budget of this movie. I don't think you need to have any more. Yeah. But let's get to some of the beats of the movie.
Yeah. Sure.
This movie really, like I said, deals with consequences. So we go back and we visit some of the characters that we know pretty well at this point. We go back to the Continental, and Winston and Sharon, who I didn't know Lance Reddick's name, and now we know his name.
Because this is the first time it's said in one of the movies.
Right. Which, what a legend. That dude's just a legend. Sharon. Like, that sounds like, you know that Key and Peele skit, the substitute teacher?
Oh, yes.
And he's like,
you want to go to Wabalake?
Balake. Hey, Ron. Sharon instead of Sharon.
I had a middle school social studies teacher that we had a kid named Aaron in our class and called him Aaron.
Really?
Ironically, yeah, it was funny. Especially because we had this class at like, it was like the first period of the day, and like Aaron was always like half asleep. So like,
so okay, he didn't
wake up, Aaron. Wake up, Aaron. It's time to learn about the Romans.
Hey, you know, we love the Romans. This movie is called Parabellum, which Parabellum loosely translates to prepare for war. Jake and I made sure to look that up. Now, I took 7 years of Latin and studied Roman culture. And so I was familiar. I just wanted to make sure it was correct. Yeah. But
Winston, Ian McShane's character, there's a phrase he says, I can't remember the whole thing. He says it kind of towards the climax or leading up to the climax of the movie, but it has something to do with
it's essentially buckle up, but in Latin.
Something to the effect of like, you know, if you desire peace, prepare for war.
Yeah. And that's pretty close, if not the actual.
Parabellum being prepare for war.
At the beginning of this movie picks up right after chapter 2, which I think is a little bit different than the transition from 1 to 2. I could see there being a little bit more time, maybe a day or two, but this picks up in the moments after chapter 2.
I will say, I agree with you. Like, physical time, it seems like there's been more pass between 1 and 2 than 2 and 3. But as far as like where I'm at in my mind with where our characters are, I feel like they're kind of in the same spot.
And this movie is like, it's low-key hard to judge time with these John Wick films.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to think a lot about time.
No, I don't think you are, because even though I mean the first movie came out what 2014.
Yeah.
This is a 9-year-old franchise, and it's still like week two.
Exactly. And
Like
we're flying all over the world. We go to Rome in the second one, we go to North Africa in this one, but like
yeah, yeah.
it seems like what mere hours pass.
I know. I was like, this dude is like getting it done, man.
Yeah.
But my first thing I wrote is how do all these homeless people get connected with Morpheus? Like for real. Because John is continually, continually is checking his watch to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that he hasn't become excommunicado. And then he looks over and there's this homeless guy that goes, hurry up, John. I'm like,
Yeah.
how many homeless people do you control,
I feel
Morpheus?
like it's this like underground network of homeless people that's like actually like Big Brother spying on like the world. It's like actually uh Lawrence or yeah, Lawrence Fishburne's character actually like controls the city because he knows where everything is at all times because like he has all these homeless people spying on everyone.
Yeah, he's got freaking pigeon power too. I mean, this dude is he keeps calling himself the king. I mean,
Yeah.
rightfully so. So John hurries and gets to the library, and he has a stash in the library in a book. Now that granted, I mean that's a book I will never check out. So
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense, but he also has a picture of his wife, which means that okay, did he make this stash after he got married?
I thought about this too because like if you think back to one, like he literally buried all his like what I'm gonna call Baba Yaga stuff, like all his
Yeah,
like his his coins and his all the stuff from his, shall we say, previous life before he got married, before he walked away from everything. He buries it under concrete, so it's very
right.
it very much gets the sense of like you know he's put this away. But then I see this book and I'm like, how did he really give this up though? Or like did he
Right.
like fully believe that like he was done for good? You know what I mean? Or did
I
he or
have to think he did.
was there some, but this book makes me think, was there some part in the little back of his mind that he was just like, I might need to get back at the game someday, so I'm gonna stash stuff not buried in cement.
He seems to be somebody that really thinks things through
Yeah.
sometimes. Um
Sometimes.
Sometimes well, he obviously is very well versed in this whole universe.
Right.
So I guess it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he opens this book, grabs some coins, and then there's a crucifix that he grabs as well and a marker. And then this absolute Giga Chad walks through just this mountain of a human, this just absolute beefcake, just walks in, and and then he goes, and he's like, "How you doing, John?" And John's like, "Hey, like it's not even 6 o'clock yet. I still got time." He's like, "Nobody's gonna know." And then, and the way the camera, the angle is shot, it's like shooting down on him a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. He's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And then he says yes, and then he gets into this fight in a library, um, and he kills a guy with a book, but the book is still in good enough shape that he puts it back.
It's a big book.
That's a that's some freaking war and peace over there. Like, um, which now that proves like he can kill. I remember, so I hadn't seen this in a while. I saw this in theaters in 2019. I hadn't seen this in a while, but I still remembered of all of the kills of any of it. I still remembered the book kill.
Yeah.
I was like, he killed a guy with a book. How legendary is that? Um, and so then he goes and he's still got a little bit of time left. So he goes and he finds this doctor. Um, and the doctor sews him up real nice until it hits 6 o'clock. And then he stops. It's like you knew he was gonna stop.
Yeah.
Um, and then he
Because
makes him
that's the
shoot him
rules.
twice. I know that's the rules, but
Yeah. The
that
whole
was
shooting
interesting.
thing. The shooting thing kind of is just like, I get the concept here, but like how are they gonna know?
I Yeah, and it's almost like shooting him twice.
Yeah,
That I feel like if you were to pistol whip him, shoot him once, rough him up a little bit, that makes sense because essentially he's saying, I need you to help me finish this or
yeah,
stop bothering me, until I finish this. But yeah, the two, and obviously it was really funny when he goes, okay, make sure not to hit that, and
yeah.
then he just like goes and
Oh,
make sure not to hit boom. Um, that was funny, but it just again shows that one, everybody knows John Wick.
yes,
Everybody knows John Wick, and they all respect him so much that they kind of want to help him.
yeah,
Which is really interesting because he is quite literally an assassin. Um, then he kind of escapes from the dock and heads on over to what I can assume is like an antique store.
yeah.
Um, it was like this weird antique store, and so he goes, and then he happens to be, these guys start coming after him. He happens to find a gun section, which honestly, in every antique store I've ever been in, there's been a gun
There's a
section.
gun
So that
section.
that is one of the most believable parts about this movie is that there's a gun section. And this was really weird. I don't know what you thought about this. He picks a gun. Oh, I like this gun. And then the bullet doesn't fit. So he modifies the
Yeah.
gun.
He essentially builds his own gun out of parts of other guns,
Yeah.
which like is just like very John Wick thing to do. But
And then
there's a
the
character in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I'm pretty sure it is, that like builds a gun out of other gun parts in like the hotel. Like he opens this suitcase and he's got all these guns in there and he just like builds like a new gun. And so
mhm.
it reminded me of that.
Like I didn't know. I mean, I knew adults played with Legos, but I didn't know there were Legos for adults. And apparently guns are Legos for adults. Um, but do not
Okay.
play with them. Do not play with
Please
them.
don't.
Anyway, uh, so he only grabs one bullet, which is like, okay. He grabs one bullet, shoots the first guy, then runs to the knife section. And what I wrote down is I said, throw whatever you have, but you just happen to be in the antique knife section. So he's like fighting with a couple of guys and just throwing knives at him. Um, and then he kills three of the men, and then there's one guy kind of like bleeding out. So he takes an axe and just
Yeah.
throws an axe and just nails the guy in the head.
Yeah.
And that was wild. I mean, I thought of you multiple times during this movie because I was like, you're not somebody that's excited by hyperviolence necessarily.
Yeah.
Like you're not somebody that's like, oh man, this is epic. Like let's see him kill a billion people. Like that's
Yeah.
that's not who you are. And I'm not necessarily that way, but I guess it's because I'm never gonna be an assassin or like a ninja or kill
Yeah.
anybody that I'm kind of like, it's kind of cool. It's like
It's
that's why I like mob movies. I'll
this
never be Italian.
yeah, that's why you like mob movies. Um no, this whole series has kind of had this like James Bond quality to me. And I thought about this a few years ago. I was like, why does every guy like James Bond on some degree? And I think it's because James Bond is who is like the penultimate like of what we're taught traditional masculinity is.
Yeah,
Right?
he
You know,
is.
he's suave, he dresses well, he, you know, gets any beautiful woman he wants, but he's also a badass. He can fight, he can shoot, he is
Yeah,
in like the best physical shape ever. And I think John Wick kind of has some of those similar qualities of like, you know, he like very much taps into like his violent masculineness. And I think there's a lot of guys that, whether you want to
that's
say
appealing to
like,
them.
yeah, whether you want to say like we're taught to, men are taught to believe that you're supposed to, you know, violence is manly or whether it's inherent, whatever.
Right. And yeah,
Behaviorists have debated this will debate this for the next 100 years probably.
yeah.
But like there's like this inherent like I could never do this, so it's cool to see a character in a movie do things that like in my mind I'm like, oh, that would be badass, but also I'd go to jail and I could never pull this off.
Yeah, these movies give us the freedom to imagine what it would be like to be an assassin or a
It's a form of
ninja or
escapism,
something.
really.
Yeah, I mean, it really is without the consequence
Right.
of going to jail or, having police presence. You
We're
can,
losing a finger.
yeah, yeah, or losing a finger, which we'll get to.
So weird.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of makes sense, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it because I
Okay.
really, I really think it makes sense. So then John Wick fights people on a horse, and he
Because why
uses a
not?
horse as a weapon.
We've had knives, we've had revolvers. Let's go full old west and bring out the horse.
I said that this movie should honestly, if it wasn't called John Wick, it should be called Be Seeing You the movie, because he says Be Seeing You like all the time, and I don't know if that's a code thing. If you noticed, you had mentioned the very first movie that John Wick had that back tattoo.
Mm-hmm.
That ballerina has the same back tattoo.
Yeah.
And so that kind of pulls that full circle. Um, and anyway, I think moving forward, one of the big elements of the movie that we meet that I don't know how big this is going to be moving forward, but is the adjudicator.
Yeah.
That character is really interesting. Especially for this world.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, this movie is all about consequences. And that is like the manifestation of consequences is this adjudicator character, because she walks in, she goes to the Continental, she goes to the Bowery, she even goes to the ballerinas.
Yeah, the Belarusian ballet that John Wick goes to escape.
Yes. So she goes to all these characters, and this is the point in the movie where she kind of comes into play. And she literally, I mean, she just oozes confidence.
Yeah. It's
like as a it's weird.
Yeah. I find that interesting because we've seen like we know that the high table's a thing,
Mm-hmm.
but we've yet to see like we've yet to see that personified until we get to her, right? We just we think of we hear the high table and we know like they're in charge, but we don't have any connection to them above like the individual managers of all the different continentals, right? Those are kind of our authority figures of the universe
Right.
thus far that we've met and seen like interact with. So now you introduce the adjudicator, and she's above everyone else. She's the one that's not only telling us the rules but enforcing them and meting out punishment for when people in her eyes, and we can then by association assume in the eyes of the high table, have broken the rules.
And she's swift, but you're absolutely right. I mean, up until this point, Winston has kind of been our idea of, okay, this is kind of what the high table is. Obviously, Santonio D'Antonio, he technically was a member of the high table, but not for long enough for that
he
to
was
really
like
be
so
relevant.
like illegitimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it didn't really even count there. So this just adds to it. And I honestly, this is one of the reasons why I'm glad this franchise has had as much success as it has, because this has been thought out.
Mm-hmm.
Like this world building that they've been doing in these movies that you just think are just movies watching a guy kill a bunch of people creatively. No, I mean, the amount of world building they've done is worth the extra budget. It's deserving of this extra box office that it gets. And so I just thought that was a really cool character. And speaking of the ballet that John goes to, he goes to this ballet, gets passage to Casablanca, and then he goes and meets Sophia's character, played by Halle Berry. That's part of where I think the budget went is Halle Berry.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
uh,
I think like she was a really good addition to this movie. I really
I
liked that
agree.
character. Um because we we just went through seeing John Wick be, indebted to someone because he'd given the
Yeah,
marker to Santoni D'Antonio, and that's kind of the propelling force of the second movie. And then we see the other side of the coin in this movie where when John Wick needs help, he goes in and calls in a marker that someone else or that he gave, I guess you could say someone else gave him, someone else is indebted to him. Sophia Halle Berry's character is indebted
right.
to him. And so I thought that was really interesting because seeing like their first interaction when he's calling her marker and thinking seeing that scene play out and then thinking back to how that same sequence played out when Santonio called John Wick's marker in the previous movie and seeing that same interaction from a different side now, I thought was a really interesting story point.
Yeah, and it's cool to see that she kind of leveled up.
Yeah.
So she was like a John Wick, and then she leveled up to running the Continental in.
Mm-hmm.
It's technically the Moroccan Continental. Um, and so she goes and she brings him to this other guy. Um, that I'm not exactly sure. Like he's related to the high table, but I don't think he is on the high table. It's
This
kind of confusing.
once we get to Casablanca, um, I feel like it gets really fuzzy. I'm kind of glad that you felt that was fuzzy too, because I thought I was just missing something.
Yeah, because essentially to go pretty fast with this, because it's fuzzy. I mean, he meets this guy, then they go and fight, and he tells him he gives the worst directions of
Kills
all
another
time.
dog, which can we stop killing
No,
dogs,
that
please?
dog didn't die. He just got shot. Because she had two dogs, and two
She had
dogs.
three dogs.
She had three dogs.
She had three dogs.
Well, this changes things. Yeah, that guy deserved to not have a right kneecap,
Or testicles.
or testicle. And those dogs just kept like their purpose in this movie was to kind of jump on bad guys and then just kind of continually chew at them,
Yeah.
like
Which
every time
like
it's just
I another thing this is that I read about in a lot of ways the same ways that they had to reinvent, fighting styles for this movie and like gun fu created
Mhm.
that as a thing. Um Dog training for movies, like you had never seen dogs like fight like quite like this before in movies, so like they
Hmm.
kind of created this own like dog martial arts for this movie, um which I
See, I
thought
didn't know
like
that. That's cool.
yeah, it's like
Yeah,
it's very John Wick because like of course like the dogs can't fight like normal dogs, like they have to fight differently.
yeah. And so she sends him off. She helps send him off into the desert where he goes and is supposed to meet this guy that's above the high table.
Yeah.
Which I guess if it was a woman, that would be the lazy Susan. Because lazy Susans sit on
I get
top
it,
of
I get
tables.
it.
Okay, cool.
Oh my.
Um, but it's this random guy, and they give terrible directions, and they say, "Go until you can't go any further, then go a little bit further,"
It
and
rem-
then
this low-key reminded of when Jesus wanders in the desert and gets tempted by Satan.
see,
Like,
I thought of that, and then I thought of The Office, where they say, in order to get to Shroot Farms, you have to go like until you hear the beehive.
okay, that too.
That's what I thought. Two
But like,
different two different things right there.
yeah,
um, but goes and meets this guy and cuts off his he John Wick cuts off his own ring finger.
yeah.
So we have essentially the Banshees of Inisherin, but in with sand, and he cuts off his ring finger, which I think goes again to these consequences because yes, he made that choice to marry Helen and kind of go and leave the life, and he comes back, and then he doesn't really get to be the same guy, I guess, as like who Helen married. He kind of has to
Yeah.
absolve himself, like wash him of that, and so he cuts off that finger. So I think it's honestly kind of symbolic.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. And then he basically says you need to go and kill Winston. So we're back in New York again. Um, and then they've been doing these. They do in the end of the second act and the third act of this movie. They do like a really cool camera trick where like John Wick and then the other guy just disappear. Like
Mm-hmm.
I always think those are really cool. There's a scene in the first Bourne movie where he's walking. He had just gotten off of the boat. So this is the beginning of the movie. And he walks past, and then there's this bus that drives by, and then he's gone.
Yeah.
But it's funny because you can see his feet under the bus because essentially what he does is right as that bus starts, he bolts and he's like running with the bus or the car or whatever. And so it's not exactly clean, but when you're watching the movie and you're not thinking about it, it looks really cool. But somehow they did this really cool effect with the camera. And I really that just adds to I think his lore as and
yeah.
he pulls it, and then the other guy he's fighting with at the end pulls it, and like they keep pulling it on each other, which is kind of funny. So we go, and this portion of the movie, the third act, where it's John Wick is able to use all of the Continental, and I just like seeing Lance Reddick fight. I just love him so much.
Like butlery civilized fighting, but it's like a different level of badassery.
Yeah.
And the fact that like his shirt didn't even come untouched.
He's such a unit, man. He's so good in Fringe too. But yeah, and then Winston's just chilling.
I love that. Honestly, I love
knew
that.
You were gonna love that.
I love Winston in general, but like I felt like he has like he's such like a menacing character in that like he lived this life at one point. He's too old for it now, and so he lets other people do the fighting for him. But like there's just like this aura about him that it's like if he really needed to, like I fully believe like Winston could kick some ass.
No, I agree. And I thought like when he was sitting in there, I was like, Jake's gonna love this part of the movie because I know how much you love.
He literally sits there drinking what I choose to believe is bourbon.
I think it's probably bourbon.
In this just lavish secret lair surrounded all these guns while John Wick and Lance Reddick's character, what's his name that we learned in this movie?
Sharon.
Sharon go around just like mowing people down.
The last kind of two notes I have, and I'll just say them and then we'll talk about the end of the movie. I said John Wick doesn't conserve ammo well.
No.
Like that's something like he really doesn't do in any of the movies, but it's really noticeable here. And then the last thing I said is I want an MTV Cribs of the Continental because
yes.
Like yes. Adam Jorge is rubbing off on me because he literally I was thinking like, what is this architecture? How is this an actual building? Like I don't understand how this
You're thinking too hard about it.
I know I'm thinking too hard about it because it's really cool, but I do want an MTV Cribs after this. But to be able to use the Continental as a set piece, I think was really cool. That final fight, like I said at the beginning of this pod, I thought that where they fought and the use of glass and stuff, I thought that was super, super cool. Yeah. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
I could never live in a place like that, or even probably even like if that was my office, how many papers would be everywhere? And cans of Celsius energy drink sponsor us.
Please do.
Please do. It's the only thing that gets me through the day. That and Jesus.
Some days.
But this third act of the movie, I really kind of like that those guys were John Wick fanboys.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of thought that was funny, but we got to see John Wick fight with a katana, um, and kind of do a couple of new things. That was really cool. And then they have this parlay, and
Mhm.
John Wick ends the movie at the feet of Morpheus, which I don't remember the guy's character's name, and I quite honestly don't.
The Bowery King. He doesn't even have a
Okay,
name. He's just like known by his title.
okay, so Morpheus, and so he's at, and he goes like, John, I'm pretty pissed off. Are you pissed off? And it just
Yeah.
ends with John going, yeah.
Yeah.
And then that leads to I don't even know where we're going with the fourth movie.
We it has Lawrence Fishburne has to be like, I feel like he has to almost take over for Winston. Like what Winston was to this movie, I want Lawrence Fishburne to be for 4. I feel like that's what we were set up for by the end of this movie.
I feel that too. I know he's in it. I know
Yeah.
Winston's in it. I know it has to do with John Wick meeting the High Table.
Yeah.
That's all I know. I also early reviews of this movie, and then we'll get to Rosebud and Thorn and everything. Early reviews of Chapter 4 say that it is the best action film in 10 years.
Wow. Ooh.
Which is saying something. It's also
Yeah.
almost 3 hours long. So imagine another hour of what we've
What
been
isn't
talking
3 hours long these days, to be honest?
I mean, you and I had a what like a 40-minute
Oh my gosh,
conversation,
yes.
and it was interesting. It was really
Yeah.
interesting. We had a 40-minute conversation because the newest Mission Impossible movie is clocking in right now in 3.5 hours. That's what they're using for test screenings. Obviously, they're going to cut it down, but apparently, it has been so well received that it's like, how much do we cut out of this? Because
Yeah.
people love it so much. So Jake and I had a whole conversation about what we would do, what are the options.
No.
But that's what one when we get to that movie and do that review,
Yeah.
we'll talk about it there. So now's the time where we talk about our Rosebud and Thorn. Jake, what are your Rosebud and Thorn for this?
So I have 2 roses this week. I'm going to give a rose again to Ian McShane for his character Winston, because this movie, like
You love Winston.
I thought I liked Winston in the first 2. This movie, I was just like, give me more, because he's finally not the authority figure, and so there's an extra layer to him. We see the layer of him like, oh, maybe he doesn't know all the rules. Maybe he isn't always right. Maybe he's not the moral compass of the high, the high
Right.
table of this, by extension, this universe of assassins that we live in this series. And his willingness to just be like, no, I'm gonna choose to break the rules. Like at the end, it's just like the way that like John Wick won't kill him, and I'm blanking here, but like before they make the parlay,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. It's just like that whole last scene with the adjudicator. It's kind of like this agreement of like, okay, we all broke a lot of rules here, but
Just gonna ignore it.
sweep this under the rug.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, like I found it interesting to see him bend and or break the rules.
Yes, because he was so strict with the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, and it wasn't like an obnoxious strict, but it was
No.
like remember, this is
Yeah. It was
no
what
blood
made
is
me
spilled.
like it was what made me like him in the first place. So then to see that kind of twisted and
Mhm.
changed in his character, I really liked, and I think that's really one of the big points of growth and change for characters in this movie. My other rose is going to go to Halle Berry's character of Sophia. I really enjoyed her. I know she's not in it for long, but I think she matches John Wick's level of badassery.
I agree.
And is just
She's a great actress too.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
she does this so well, and it's as much as like that part of the movie doesn't make sense to me logically or like story wise. Like there's so many fuzzy things there that I was just like, I mean, this is great though.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like I enjoy her character, like I don't care. My bud is a question, and my question is, how many people are in this secret assassin society? Because we start John Wick 1 feeling like it's very exclusive.
Mhm.
But then seeing how many people try to kill John Wick when he's excommunicado,
Yeah.
like it's literally everybody. It's literally everybody, and it kind of bugs me because I'm like, I liked that it was exclusive in the first one. There was this exclusiveness about it, this secretness, and I feel like there's just so many people that, and I get it, like we're in New York City, like there's so many people in New York City in general, so like by comparison, probably, but like there's just, it feels like we've gotten to the point where we've seen so many people that are in on this secret assassin society that it's kind of like, is this just for everyone? And that kind of, I don't know, waters it down for me a little bit.
I think that obviously I don't necessarily have the answer, but I think honestly, with where they want to go with these stories, and I think it would hinder them to have so few people because it's almost like a bigger leap in logic to say, okay, where are these people coming from? When it's only been hours,
Mm-hmm.
then because
Yeah.
that one gives them fodder to fight,
Yeah.
that gives them bodies to kill,
I
essentially.
I understand the
Yeah.
story purposes of it. It's just, it kind of
Right. No, it is interesting though. Yeah.
it's a
What
hole
you
that
said is
bugs
interesting.
me.
Yeah.
And then my thorn is, it seems you said at the beginning that this movie is about consequences, and I agree. It's about consequences of the what's transpired in the first two movies. But my thorn at the same time is that it seems like death and violence have no meaning or really consequences in this,
Mm.
and that seems like it doesn't make sense because I agree with what you said about consequences, but it seems like in answering for those consequences, there's just so many other people that get killed, and like the fact that like the doctor getting shot twice is just kind of like, oh well. The fact that like John Wick cuts off his finger and then they're like, okay, yeah, you're good, and then they like cauterize the wound and like, oh, it hurts, and then he's like, okay, it's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it feels like, and I get it, like this series is about like extreme levels of violence. That's what this series
Right.
is. I understand that. Because it's all about fight sequences. But I feel like we've gotten to the point where like there's so much death and violence in these movies where it's just like, for me, I'm just kind of like, death doesn't mean what it usually means. Or like
Mm.
acts of violence, even just like from like a character's like pain response don't seem to like mean as much. And so that was my thorn.
No, those are good. Those are good. I think for me, my rose again is production design. Um, from the set to the color in this movie again is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked those. Um, I think another rose again is this world building, even though it kind of can be a little heavy handed, and we kind of talked a little bit about how it's like, okay, everybody's a part of this.
Mm-hmm.
I still think it's fascinating and it gives us a reason to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my bud, this may surprise you. My bud is that I don't know. In watching these three movies so close together, it's kind of exhausting.
Yeah.
Which I know you're like, but Ben, you love these movies. I do, but watching what has essentially been like 6 hours worth of John Wick just killing a bunch of people kind of can get old.
Yeah.
Like legit, it can get old. Am I excited for this fourth one? Yes. Am I a little less excited? Yes, but I also feel like by the time we go and see it, we'll be good. Like,
Yeah.
because we record these in advance,
Yeah.
so there's
We
a
got a
couple
little
of weeks.
time.
Yeah, we got a
Yeah.
little time. So I think by the time that happens,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be good. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought, and that's why I said it's a bud because it's something that doesn't make me not like the movie or something. I think they just need to, and it's not even necessarily something they need to improve on.
Yeah.
It's just the way in which you watch these. You can't just binge.
Movies this is what fascinates me about movies is movies don't exist in a vacuum. You're going to walk into every viewing experience differently, and every viewing experience is going to be differently, even just from the fact of like, when do you have to stop to go to the bathroom or to change your laundry or to because you get hungry or thirsty, and you know, even that, or what notification comes up on your phone, or if you're streaming this, like what part buffers, like those little things, like so inconsequentially, can change your viewing experience. And I think that's part of the fascinating things about movies is that you can watch. Look at all these movies right here. I see if I can point. Yep, there we go. All these movies. I've seen all these so many different times, but I love having them all to be able to go back and watch them because I know each viewing experience is going to be different.
That's really good. That and you're absolutely right. And that's because I was thinking about like last night I watched, and then we'll get to favorite kill. Last night I watched the movie The Fugitive from 1993 with Harrison Ford, which is a
I
unit of a
love
movie. It's
that
so good.
movie.
Speaking of Harrison Ford, you've got your new poster up there.
Yes.
Um,
Indiana Jones and the Raiders
Raiders.
of the Lost Ark.
But that movie, and I was thinking I need to get this on physical media. And one of the biggest issues I have with digital media, which it's not necessarily a huge problem, but for me, it's almost like preservation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that you have more opportunities when you have physical media to watch it whenever.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a Wi-Fi connection. You don't have to, so you can bring it out and you can play it, or you could take it, and it's more experiential.
Yeah.
And that always, for me, being able to bring something and put it in and show it to somebody else, that you're right, it's not in a vacuum, and that always makes me have a little bit more enjoyment when
Yeah.
I'm watching the movie. But man, Harrison Ford, I literally watch it. I'm like, this dude is a freaking star.
Legend.
Like he is a movie star. He still is. People
Yes.
still go. People went and saw Call of the Wild, which objectively wasn't a great movie because it was him.
Yeah.
And when you still have that star power at 80, legend,
Legend.
absolute legend. So now is the time where we talk about our favorite kill. Jake, what was your favorite kill in this movie?
So you actually already talked about my favorite kill. My favorite kill is the first one with the book. Just because it's so like, we saw him kill someone with a pencil last movie, and now it's just like it doesn't even need to be sharp.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is power.
Yeah. And I should have looked this up. I can't remember which James Bond movie this is, but there was something about the guy that he kills, that John Wick kills first with the book. He's big. He feels. I think he has like a Russian accent, or at least kind of Eastern European
he's Russian
accent. And it reminds me of, I think it's from Russia with Love. That's got there's this big Russian guy, you call him Jaws because he's got these like, his teeth get replaced and they're like all metal and everything. Like literally, it's like if you took metal shark teeth and put it in a person's mouth.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, there was something that like is about that specific villain that like called me back to that, and I really enjoyed that. And then just the fact of like he can kill someone with a book. It just,
Yeah.
there's a line from Ratatouille, your favorite cooking movie. It's where the blonde like sous chef with the tight buzz cut.
Yeah,
And
the Gordon Ramsay light.
yeah, but
Yeah.
he's like Eastern European, and he's like, I killed the guy with this
This
thumb.
Yeah.
There's something about that just is inherently John Wick, and I keep thinking of it with every one of these movies.
I was watching Kitchen Nightmares as well last night, and that reminded me of him. Anyway, my favorite kill. So I was gonna say the book because that's the one I remember out of all these movies, but in watching this again, when he kills the guy with the horse, that is so fried.
Yeah.
He literally just like aims and fires a horse. Like you fire a horse. That's got to be. I had originally written down my favorite kill was the book, but since you said the book, and because I'd already mentioned it. I wanted to mention the horse as a weapon. I thought that was quite literally one of the funniest things. And he did it twice. He did it more than once.
Yes.
It's like, all right, pow. You know. So those are our favorite kills. I think overall thoughts for me, um, this franchise in some ways kind of reminds me a little bit of the Fast and the Furious. Because you start off with a premise that is simple. And then it just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds. And the popularity of this movie franchise continues. And it just, for me, and it gets more fantastical. Like when you and I went and saw Creed 3, which our review is up for that. When we went and saw Creed 3, we watched Fast 10's trailer, Fast X.
Yeah.
And you and I like turned to each other when Dominic Toretto jumps off one ramp and then like falls onto like a lower road, and he takes two helicopters and smashes them together. And you're like, I don't think that's how like physics work. And it's not, but it's awesome.
It's cool.
And so that kind of, I don't know, it's that kind of spirit.
Oh,
and
yeah, sure.
But this is definitely a franchise that is growing in number. It's projected to almost double the 56 million of the first. So overall, I mean, I really like this movie. I like this franchise. I think this is the best of the three. I think watching this one and then going back and watching the first one gives you a different viewing experience. As a whole. And I'm excited to see where they go. Here. What do you think?
I mean, I was very lukewarm about this when we started, and I will admit I've kind of warmed up to it. I don't think I'll ever like them as much as you do, but I do. I get what the appeal is, and you know, they are entertaining. I will say that. And I think, you know, I will agree, this is the best one yet. And so I'm interested to see, where this fourth one goes, to see if, you know, because it's definitely, I feel like this one definitely projects us in a certain trajectory. And so I'm interested to see if, where that takes us. So.
Oh, for sure. That it's exciting for me. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. This is our third of 3 Wick Weeks. We did it. We got through 3 weeks of John Wick. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell to get all notifications on upcoming content. Jake and I have plenty more for you in the coming weeks. If you want to follow us on social media, our socials are down below. Make sure to follow us. We talk about movies there as well. We post when new stuff is coming out. Yeah, if that's all for Jake, I'm Ben Sparrow. That's Jake Biller. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week. And cut.